introduction. I have been in education for a long time, 25, 30 years. Started out in the 90s as a middle school teacher. I taught, oddly enough, both English and math. I am a strange person, but I love them both. And here I am many years later, and now I spend most of my time supporting principals through the main idea, through writing book summaries and creating PD ideas for leaders. And I also run mastermind groups. There's Anna's here from one of my mastermind groups. I run groups of leaders, about 8 or 10 leaders. We get together every other week and we do our own professional learning. So it's great to be here. I thought that maybe we could start with everyone introducing themselves. If in the chat you could share your name, your geographic location, and if you would like your title, anything you'd like, it would just be good to see who is here. Is everybody good with using the chat? Excellent. Yes, Audrey from Atlanta. Wonderful. Kara from Springfield. Marsha from Massachusetts. Perfect alliteration there. Oh, good. Amy from an IB school. My husband works in an IB school. He's a guidance counselor here in New York City. Great. Nick from New Haven. Wonderful. So fast I can't read them. Wendy in Kansas. Jeffrey from Lansing, Michigan. All these big important states during the election, huh? Sam Coach, fantastic. Oh, good. Javier from the Bronx, wonderful. Excellent. Thank you. I really appreciate getting to see a little bit who's here. I usually ask if people can leave their videos on because it's a little bit hard to talk to myself. It's great to talk to other people. So anyway, today we are going to talk about 3 changes in grading practices that will reduce stress, improve learning, and contribute to equity. Let's see, let me just, there you go. All right. So 3 big issues that we are all going through. Don't run when you see this, because I hope to give you some strategies to handle these very large topics. I don't really need to go into a lot of detail, but certainly our schools are experiencing a great deal of stress from everything going on, not just the pandemic, but the climate, the election, everything. Inequity, without a doubt. Because of the pandemic, the haves and the have-nots in our school, it has just been exacerbated, and learning loss has been a result of a lot of what's going on. So anyway, some hands, who's facing all 3 of these issues in their schools? People in their schools, wake up, raise hands. Let me see. Yes. I would be surprised if anyone didn't experience these 3. And so, so what I want to do is share some concrete ideas for addressing these 3, and they are very big topics. And the most resilient leaders that I know, what they do is they focus on what they can control. So here's a small exercise you can do with your extra time this weekend. What you can do is create a chart with 3 columns. The first column lists the items over which you have complete control. When you wake up in the morning, if you do a 2-mile walk like Mark does, if you drink water, if you create a weekly newsletter to keep parents apprised of what's going on, if you put a smile on your face when you meet with students. So the first column is things over which you have complete control. The second column is for things over which you have some influence. So for example, the teaching at your school. You can have PD lunch and learns to help with the teaching in your school. You can have office hours that are open that worried parents can come and speak with you. So you can't solve worry, you can't improve all the teaching, but you can influence those things. The third column, things over which you have no control. What is the hospitalization rate for COVID-19? When will the vaccine get here? Those kinds of things. So even though I present these really big topics like stress and learning loss and inequity, I want to present something today where we can focus on what you may have complete control over, or at least some influence over, and that is through grading. I'm going to talk about grading. There are some concrete everyday things that you can do. Will grading solve inequity, learning loss and stress? Of course not, it won't, but there's actually a great deal that you can do. And when I was talking with Mark and he said, what do you want to talk about, Jen, for the SAM talk? And I said, grading, but I was a little worried that people wouldn't sign up. They wouldn't really find it such a compelling topic. And it actually really is, because it does hit these three big topics. And then I got off the Zoom call with Mark and I opened the New York Times, and this is the article that I saw. Sorry. Hate going back and forth from the PowerPoint. So this was the article that I saw. You're out of your mind if you think I'm ever going back to school. When learning is virtual, Black parents can watch for unfair treatment. So this was an op-ed piece by a Black education journalist, and it was about this survey that was sent to 10,000 Black parents asking them, what do you like about virtual school? It was an online survey. And I don't know, Mark, do you want to unmute and read this first part to take a break from my voice?
Sure. One mother reported that she had intervened in real time when her son's teacher threatened to withhold participation credit because his noisy siblings made it difficult to hear his answers to her questions. The teacher told the child, who lived in a one-bedroom apartment, to find a quieter space.
Okay, thank you, Mark. So this student was not being given participation credit because when he tried to participate, he lived in a tiny one-bedroom apartment. The teacher couldn't hear his answers because there were siblings and there was noise there, and told him, not knowing he lives in a one-bedroom apartment with siblings and whoever else, to find a quieter space. So I'm wondering if in the chat box you could share, what do you think might be an alternative to docking this boy's participation grade because he lives in a small apartment? Does anyone want to share what might be an alternative? Class Dojo, use the chat feature, headphones, send home some headphones, offer reflection options. Wow, these are great ideas. Asynchronous learning, hold up a sign. Yep, I know a lot of teachers doing that. Whiteboards, thumbs up, thumbs down. Building a relationship, yes, so that the teacher would know what's going on. Signals, positive reinforcement. Yes, so unfair. I can send you the link to this article. Yeah. Set up separate one-on-one Zoom meeting. Yeah, so this group should have been there to to address the problem, but actually the mother did, who was watching. And part of what some Black parents said that they liked about virtual schooling was the fact that they could monitor more of the racial microaggressions their children were going through in school. That was part of what they liked about virtual learning. So this mother explained that she spoke directly to the teacher, suggesting that her son be allowed to mute his mic and type his answers in the chat box, just like all of you. Problem solved. The fact that the teacher was willing to dock the child's grade instead of coming up with a creative way that the child could answer and still participate, these are the things that I feel often happen to Black children, Dr. Chappelle Magruder said. That's the mother. If they can't conform to the exact way that the teacher wants, they get graded harder, meaning Black students get graded harder. So these are the types of grading incidents that are happening in all of our schools, whether we know about it or not. And these are the kind of incidents that increase stress, inequity, and yes, learning loss. So now that this happened with the boy, even though the mother came up with a creative solution, don't you think that boy is going to withdraw more from the learning? Think about the damage to that relationship with the teacher. So yes, so something as tiny and insignificant as grading can impact stress, equity, and learning. So really every aspect of what teachers, leaders, SAMs do should support learning, be equitable, and have a positive impact on a student's emotional well-being. The opposite of those three, everything that we do should impact these three areas. So today we're going to focus on grading to ensure that the grading in our school meets these three criteria. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about is from this book that Mark mentioned, Fair Isn't Always Equal by Rick Wormeli. It's a great book. It's about differentiation, it's about assessment, it's about grading, but today we are going to zoom in on grading. And if you'd like to take a look at the rest of the book, please buy it. And also I have an 8-page summary. This is what I do. I write summaries of books and then at the end give you ideas to introduce the ideas in the book to your teachers, to your staff. And also what I do here today is a modeling of what you might do with your teachers, because the truth of the matter is that a lot of what we do in a lot of our behaviors, most of our behaviors come from our beliefs. So if you can impact the beliefs or the mindset of your staff, you can change their behaviors. So I want to start with our own beliefs. And my question is, what do you believe is the purpose of grading? And if people could share some thoughts, I loved everything you shared last time in the chat. What do you believe is the purpose of grading? Seems pretty basic, right? We've been working in schools for a long time, but any thoughts to provide feedback about student work? Yes, mastery and standards, absolutely. Show mastery, good word, keep seeing mastery. To advance learning, yes. Feedback, yes. Fantastic. To provide checkpoints on the path of growth, I love that, path of growth. Communication, absolutely. Capture progress, advance learning, feedback and mastery check. Assessment of learning, yes. A visible representation, yes, very concrete, I love that. Fantastic. These are all fantastic beginnings in thinking about what grading is. And this is what Rick Wormeli said himself. He said, grades should convey how well students have achieved proficiency or mastery of grade level standards, nothing more and nothing less. We should question any action that distorts a grade's final declaration of mastery. That's Rick Wormeli in the book. Now, I want to warn you that this definition is deceptively simple. Show this definition to anyone and they say, of course, I agree, absolutely. But a lot of our practices contradict this very simple definition of grades as conveying mastery and nothing else. So what I'm going to do today is I'm going to introduce 3 principles of effective grading practices. And I have a one-pager that I haven't shared yet that I created just for all of you as a great way if you want to introduce what we're about to talk about today to your teachers or your staff members. But as a way to introduce it, each of these 3 principles, we're going to do a poll for each one or ask you what are your beliefs, and it's completely anonymous. So whatever you type in, no one will see except you, and we'll just share the overall results. So the first one is it up there, Mark?
Yes, it is.
Yeah, okay, sorry, I can't see it on mine for some reason. I believe students should be rewarded with grades for class participation, timeliness, and effort. Plus, grading these areas will motivate students to work hard. So put yourself somewhere in the 10 strongly agree to 1 strongly disagree continuum. And we'll just take about 30 more seconds, let people. Great, we've got a wide range. A couple people still answering. Again, it's completely anonymous, no one will see. Almost have everybody with the poll. All right, take 10 more seconds and then maybe Mark can show us the results. Okay, so if you scroll up and down, it looks like the largest number of people who strongly disagree, but there is a range, a real range, and I think that reflects what we have in our schools. Okay, so we are going to talk about the first principle of effective grading. And basically, all research shows that grades are not motivating. There's nothing about grades that are motivating. The same number of students are going to do homework, whether homework counts for 10% of the grade, 50% of the grade, or 0% of the grade. This is what research shows. And grades are simply not as motivating as teachers believe them to be. It's what I believed when I was a teacher, but there's been a lot of research, and in fact, the opposite, that grades are incredibly punitive and they disproportionately affect students of color. So think about the participation grade in the New York Times op-ed piece, right? Equity is a big theme when we discuss grades. Teachers take away points for behaviors to teach students a lesson. I did that in my day. Has anybody ever themselves or seen teachers who take away points to teach students a lesson, right? Oh, student came in late, I'm going to deduct points. That's going to teach the student to arrive on time, right? This was my practice. I'm confessing, I am admitting, that's what I used to do. The fact is that low grades prompt students to withdraw from learning, right? So remember, another theme we're talking about today is learning loss. So we think that poor grades are the result of learning loss, right? That seems to make sense. But the truth is that poor grades often contribute to learning loss because they cause students to withdraw from learning. I'm going to say that again. We think poor grades are the reflection, right, or the result of learning loss. But the truth is that poor grades often contribute to learning loss because they cause our students to withdraw from learning. So, right, you get a bad grade, you get a D, you get an F, you're a student. So what do? Well, to preserve your self-image, you're like, oh, that doesn't mean anything, or, you know, I don't care. Or maybe you really do blame yourself for that F, right? And then you feel helpless to improve. No research shows that this type of punitive grading is a motivator, none. And we really have to stop thinking of rewards, grades as rewards, right? Grades are not rewards to be earned. Grades should be about mastery, right? I love the way that Rick Wormeli phrases it in the book. He has a sentence that says, if F's taught responsibility, we would have a lot more responsible students. Right? Doesn't that make sense? If you think about it that way, if it's true that grades are what motivates kids, then all those kids getting F's, those would be your most motivated students. And I'm pretty sure that's not the case. I've never seen that to be the case. So the first principle is that grades should not include student behaviors. All right, give me a sec here. Grades should not include student behaviors. Let me give you another example. Let's say Mark Schellinger and I are both 8th grade students, right? And we both get a B in math. And I get that B because I completely understand all of the standards, but I turned in a few assignments late. Mark gets a B because he has a B-level understanding of a lot of the standards, but he's incredibly neat. And as you know, he turns in all of his work on time. So think about it. Does that B communicate which of us has a better mastery of the math, right? Because there are all these other factors about being neat, about turning work on time. I turned in my work late. So if you want to teach students about timeliness or participation or being neat, all good qualities, I don't dispute any of those, think about separating those grades out. What about a grade for mastery and then a grade for some of those other behaviors? Separate out a grade for process and a grade for product, right? Because that way, if Mark gets a B, it'll be in his mastery, then it's very clear what he needs to work on. If I get an A in my mastery and a C in my timeliness, then everybody knows, my parents, my family, the teachers, we all know Jen really has to work on her timeliness, but the B was meaningless. It didn't tell us that. So to recap, the first principle is grades should not include student behaviors. So take a moment and think back to the polling question, which was, I believe students should be rewarded with grades for class participation, timeliness, and effort. Plus, grading these areas will motivate students to work hard. So take a moment and reflect whether your thinking on this has changed, has become even stronger, and take a moment and think about, what do you think the teachers in your school believe about this first principle? All right, that was principle number 1. Mark, you want to share the second poll and we can get to principle number 2. It's always funny to talk about principles with principals, pals. So the second poll is, I believe students should not be allowed to redo work because it's not fair when other students do it correctly the first time. Do you strongly agree students should not be able to redo work? I'm full of puns. Not usually. Something about the atmosphere.
The poll isn't matching, Jen, what you just said.
Oh, is this the wrong poll?
Yes.
Oh, I'm sorry. Mark, for some reason, this is a different topic. So you want, it's all right, you want to keep, let's keep this poll here, but listen to what I'm saying. Do you agree that students should be allowed to redo work?
That's what I have up, that can I do it again? I believe students should be,
That's okay. That
Oh.
happens in technology. So just,
now it's showing correctly, I believe. Can I do it again? I mean, is it okay do I believe that a student should be able to redo an assignment or a piece of work? I don't know why the language, yeah.
Yeah, just ignore that. But should students be allowed to redo work? Do you strongly agree? Do you disagree? So we have some strong feelings here. Strongly disagree 1 and strongly agree. 1 and 10 are very strong. If you do something like this with your teachers, you can do a simple Zoom poll like this if you're meeting virtually, or if you do it in person. I love doing human continuums. Has anyone ever done those? Where you have your teachers in a room and one wall is strongly agree, one wall is strongly disagree, and you have them line up along the continuum. And first of all, it's great. Everyone needs to move their bodies, as Mark always says. And then it's also a very visual representation. Don't worry if you answered incorrectly. Again, it's all anonymous. Don't worry about it. So do you want to just end the poll since there's a little bit of confusion? You can just put a sentence in the chat if you want, which says whether you strongly agree, yes, redo work, or absolutely not. Students should not be, if you want to put it in there. Good, we have somebody says strongly agree. In the poll itself, you see it's very split with some people saying strongly agree and pretty closely behind strongly disagree. Redo work, so good. We have a lot of strongly agrees in the chat. Okay, a lot of strongly agrees are loud in the chat. Okay. So the second principle is grades should reflect final proficiency, not practice. So we might think, what does that have to do with what we just talked about? Well, first of all, let's talk about redoing work. And I know that a lot of this may sound controversial because our grading practices go back so long. So there's really some rethinking to do before the practices are going to change. So allowing students to redo work. We should allow students to redo work what's the real goal, right? We want our students to master material, and sometimes that involves redoing, retakes. So teachers who deny students this option, they need to remember that mastery is the primary goal, or it should be, right? So it doesn't really matter if some students needed an extra round of feedback or revision for proficiency, right? Think about as adults, what about the exams we take? Lawyers who took the LSAT several times versus those who took it once. So what? They're all lawyers. The MCATs, our doctors, some of our best doctors took the MCAT several times. Our accountants, our CPAs, right? We allow adults to redo things. Why shouldn't we allow students? The learning benefits of allowing redos are so strong. It gives the students opportunities to get more feedback, to learn from their mistakes, improve their knowledge, and it supports a growth mindset. So the reason to allow redos and retakes is that it maximizes learning, right? That you want to communicate to students that if you didn't learn it the first time, you should keep going. Now, some people feel like, oh my gosh, well then students are just going to be lazy, right? If they can just redo it. Well, not really, right? It's a lot less work to do it once than to do it many times. And in fact, so you write a paper, you get an F on it, and you can't redo it. Then you don't learn anything, right? You've just ended there, you don't learn anything, and it is the lazier option. And again, thinking about learning loss, right? If you have an unrecoverable F, then that's all you've learned. Whereas if you have a chance to do it again, you can make up for some of that learning loss. And we're seeing a lot of this during the pandemic. And even if students don't try their hardest the first time, because of course we have all kinds of students, they quickly learn that it's easier to put your best effort in the first time. So even if students put no effort in, I would still argue that we should allow them to have the redo. Another part of this, you see grading homework. Part of grades reflecting final proficiency, not practice. Not what we do along the way is not grading homework. How many people received grades for homework when they were in school? Absolutely. How many of us who were teachers, did you give grades for homework? I gave grades for homework. I absolutely gave grades for homework, but let's think about this. In math, if you teach the distance formula today, Thursday, and then tonight your students do homework on the distance formula, should they get a grade that's in a grade book for final proficiency if you just taught it today? Imagine if Mark gave a grade for all this stuff that I'm saying tonight and you all had to write about it and know everything about it by tonight, right? Homework is actually formative assessment. It's practice. And really what we need to give students is not grades, but non-judgmental feedback. So grades should only reflect final mastery, right? If we include the practice, the mess ups, the missteps, then the grades are not accurate. But we really need to grade at the end of the learning cycle, if that makes sense. The third thing is allowing students to submit late work. And Rick Wormeli has a quote in the book that I swear he must have written during the pandemic because it's so perfect. He says, pause for an empathetic moment. There have been times when we as adults have had something due for a committee or a graduate course, but we were too overwhelmed, disorganized, or distracted to finish by the deadline. Think of how grateful we were when the committee chair or the professor said, I understand, have it by tomorrow. So think about this right now during the pandemic. How much would it relieve stress if our teachers could say to our students, that's okay, I understand, have it by tomorrow. Now, if a student is chronically late, right, then that is a problem. But giving them a big fat F or a 0, that's not going to solve the lateness problem. No, what we should be doing is helping them figure out what are the reasons why the student is late. But giving them an F isn't going to do anything. So think back to stress, think back to learning loss. If our teachers accept late work, how much is that going to help the stress of our students? How much is that going to help learning loss? Instead of getting that F and being off the hook, now students have to keep working. So the second principle is grades should reflect final proficiency, not practice. So take a moment to reflect on the polling question, which should have been, I believe students should not be allowed to redo work because it's not fair when other students do it correctly the first time. Think about if your own thoughts have changed about that and really what your teachers believe. Do they believe that we should be allowing students to redo work? We've got time for one more. We're going to do one last poll, see if this one is the question. This one should be, yes, I believe grades should be averaged. If a student receives an F, a C, and an A, then the student should receive the average of these grades, which is a C. So, do you believe grades should be averaged? Okay. So you see by the wide range that we have, the wide range of responses, that these ideas are far from common right now. And I imagine some of what I'm saying is probably infuriating some people. And some people have probably been doing the things that I'm saying for a long time. But we have to be careful in education when we do things just because that's the way it's always been done. That's how we get stuck. It's how we get stuck in our country. It's how we get stuck in our classrooms and our schools. So, do we believe grades should be averaged? All right, I think, shall we end the poll here, Mark, and share with people? So most people strongly agree they think grades should not be averaged, but there still is a wide range of some people thinking maybe, maybe not. So the third principle. Sorry, hold on one second. Apologize for that. Sorry, my PowerPoint just died. Give me 1 second. And I can do it without the PowerPoint, but I like to have a visual for you all. So for people, are these ideas completely new? Are they ideas that people have heard of before? Anybody want to unmute and just share a sentence while I open this up for you? No, nobody does.
I think
Yeah,
if
go ahead.
you some of the standards-based practices when it comes to grading, a lot of Wormeli's, he's quoted a lot when you transition your district into a standards-based grading scale. So I am familiar with his work as well as the information provided.
That's great. Yeah, I really love just about anything that Rick Wormeli has, anything he tweets or does. So I definitely recommend him for his thoughts. He's got some great videos if you ever want to share his videos. So sorry about this. So we're up to the last principle. Thank you for sharing. Okay. Grades should be based on accurate scoring and reporting methods that do not distort student grades. So we really do need to stop averaging students' grade. A student's grade is only accurate if it reflects the current level of mastery, and this is almost impossible to do with averaging. So let me give you an analogy that I love and helps people understand about averaging, even if they aren't former middle school math teachers. So anybody here ever learn to ride a bike or teach anyone to ride a bicycle? Hands up if you've ever done that. Okay, pretty common universal experience. So let's say you're teaching your child to ride a bicycle. So the first time you go out, right, you try to hold the seat, but your child just immediately falls to the ground. Okay, that's a big fat F. Then next week, you take your child out again. You hold on to the seat of the bicycle, you let it go for a couple seconds, your child holds on and then falls off. Okay, a little better, but still a C. Then you go out next week. You're holding onto the bicycle, you're running around behind your child, you let go, and lo and behold, look at your child. She takes off, she bikes, she goes around curves, she's amazing, she's fantastic. So after those 3 experiences, does your child come back and say, oh, I got a C on that? No, your child learned to ride the bicycle. The most recent example, the most recent time your child learned to ride the bicycle. So why would you average in the F and the C if your child finally reached mastery? That's the best example I have. Another example is the one with Mark and I, if we're both students, right? Let's say we both get Bs. Last time it was problematic because of our different behaviors that were factored in. Now imagine Mark gets his B because he really understands Math Standard 1, but he does not understand Math Standard 2. So you average those two and he's got a B. How about me? I have like a B level understanding of Standard 1 and 2, so I get a B. So that doesn't really share with the student, the family, the school, the teacher, what our mastery is like. We have to stop averaging grades. We have to find a better way to do that. And a number of schools are disaggregating grades and they're giving grades by standards, by mastery. Another big part of this principle is we've got to stop using the 100-point grading scale. I used it when I was grading. Does anybody in your school, any teachers use the 100-point grading scale in your school? People think, oh, it's much more accurate than the, the rubrics with 4, 3, 2, 1. It's not the case, particularly the way that teachers assign zeros, right? When a student misses an assignment, it has a devastating mathematical consequence to give a student a 0. And let me give you another non-math example for the non-math people out there. Let's say a science teacher is having her students do a project where they have to record the temperature for 5 days, right? So the first day the student records it's 82 degrees. Then the next day it's 85 degrees. Then the next day it's 80 degrees. Then the next day it's 82 degrees. Then she gets really sick with coronavirus and she doesn't record for the 5th day. So if you average those 5 temperatures, then the average is a 65. So that student would report for her lab report that the average temperature was 65 degrees. Was the average temperature 65? Absolutely not, right? They're all in the 80s. So it's the same thing. If a student gets B, 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 and then for some reason can't turn in the last paper, and you give that student a 0, it has a devastating consequence. What happens with these devastating consequences? Students withdraw from school. Stress increases. It's inequitable. It's not accurate. So what do? I know this is really hard, but you really should replace the 0 with a 50. What? Why? Well, think about it. If you're a student getting a B, to get to an A, you just need to get 10 more points, right? If you're getting a C, 10 more points to get a B. But if you're an F, and F is anywhere from 64 to 0, you may need to get 50 more points. So it doesn't make sense to average in the 0. Even if your teachers think, oh, we're giving something for nothing, they're not. It's just a mathematical adjustment to correct a grading scale so that grades, as many of you said in the chat, can be forms of communication. And yes, I see the time, Mark. I'm just about done. Give me a minute. So one idea, and this is a fantastic idea, a number of schools have done this, particularly in the pandemic, is to only have grades of A, B, C, and IP, in progress. Get rid of the F. What's the point of giving a student an F? You're saying, okay, it's acceptable for you not to learn. No, you still got to learn. You're in progress, and it gives students hope. It reduces their stress, and there's a chance that they can recover some of that learning. So again, think about this principle. Think about what you polled for yourself. I believe grades should be averaged. So think about if you've rethought that at all, and think about what your teachers might consider about that. And I just want to end by saying this is a lot of information. I think grading is a great way to deal with some of these big issues in your school in a concrete, tangible way. If you want to reach out to me with questions, that's fine. I am going to share this, this one-pager in the chat in a moment. And basically the one-pager has a self-assessment on one side with the 3 principles, kind of like our poll. And then the other side has these 3 principles explained. This is a great activity to do with your staff members. Other ways I can help, if you want to read other book summaries, I have another book on grading. I have books on assessment, homework, if you want to beef up your own understanding. And if you like the kind of professional learning that I create, you may want to join my online mastermind group that meets every other week. You can look at my website. So I had trouble picking breakout room ideas, so I created 4 of them for what you could talk about, and I will try to put this into the chat. And I don't know if chats are going to get heated if these were also controversial, but you can take an open-ended question like, just what idea from today do you feel most passionate about? Or what aspect of grading in your own system would you most like to change? Or if you want to be a little bit more concrete in your discussions, you could discuss the idea of the ABC in progress grades, getting rid of D's and F's, or the idea of having a separate grade for effort and behavior. Or you could talk about how you might use this one-pager with your staff. or how you might use the kinds of polls that I shared today. So I'm going to put these 4 in the breakout room, because who has memory to remember anything these days with everything going on? I definitely don't. So I will put these in the chat. And yes, thank you. I usually don't talk at people for so long, but I did.
Well, Jen, we want to thank you for being our presenter today, and I'd like all the people online today, if you'd go ahead and put in the chat box your thanks or any comments you have for Jen. We'll share that with her. As you know, for SAM Talks, we always send an email after, and that email will include a link to the recording for what we just experienced. We'll also include the PowerPoint Jen referred to, also the tools that she mentioned she was going to put in the chat box. Jim will go ahead and send you a link to that as well. If you're currently a SAM team member, you also can get access to the main idea and get that regularly from Jen, and it's a wonderful resource. And it includes all kinds of other books that she's done, just not this one. It's amazing. It's the Marshall Memo on steroids. Don't tell Kim I said that. But I absolutely love this book review you do, because you just don't review the book, but you give concrete examples and ideas, Jen, for people to use this in a school setting. Before we go to breakout rooms, though, there was one thing that came up a couple of times in the chat box I wanted to mention to you, Jen. Several people immediately went to, isn't this just like teacher evaluation? In teacher evaluation, are we making a mistake to evaluate when it really isn't formative and people don't get the redo? They don't get the chance to improve. And the comment was made that maybe in the pandemic, this is even more important. And I think we've seen a lot of principals during the pandemic where they've had to do remote visits with teachers, realize that their communication really should be based on positive things they see, and how do I help improve, how do I assist this teacher instead of simply evaluating. Any comments on that, Jen, before we go to breakout rooms?
I mean, I think it's about learning in life, right? I mean, most of the way we learn is through non-evaluative feedback. This is what I see you're doing. This is where I know you want to go. It's not by giving out grades. It's not by evaluating teachers, but in any kind of rubric. It's really with building a relationship with the people you want to teach, whether that's a teacher who wants to learn or a student, and giving them feedback and being very clear about these are the expectations. This is what I want to see, and this is what I'm seeing. It's not the grading. The grading is more often used punitively on both the teacher level as well as the student level.
Makes total sense. Jen, thank you so much for spending the time with us today. For those of you who would like to stay for breakout rooms for the next 20 minutes, those breakout rooms will be available and they're opening right now.